Now it's time for Puppets, Pupils, and Producers, a story of mind over matter. Cassie's fondest childhood memories involve the monthly get-togethers with her mother's side of the family. Regardless of the rotating location, her widowed grandmother and her aunts would be in the kitchen cooking a feast featuring pierogies and cabbage rolls. While the women cooked, they spoke Ukrainian, so the drop of a name would be the only hint as to what caused their laughter, tears, or argument. The uncles would be in the garage fixing a car or something around the house, and her 22 and counting cousins would be playing tag or sneaking cigarettes, depending on their age. Upon arrival, each child was taught to greet their elders before they went to play with their cousins. Robert hated doing it because it made him stutter. Stan hated doing it because someone would ask him about school. Cassie loved every minute of it because they'd give her the hugs and kisses and the attention her parents didn't. After dessert and her cup of tea, everyone would say goodbye to the matriarch of the family and the gambling would begin. Along with feeling loved and that she belonged, at those cherished family events, she got her first period, smoked her first cigarette, and learned how to play a very profitable game of blackjack. Her family's financial stability ended when her parents were accused of embezzlement. Declaring their innocence, they implicated the young husband and said they'd cooperate with an investigation, but Cassie's aunt didn't want the police involved. No one knew who to believe, so her mother's family split into two camps of support. Cassie wanted to believe her father, but he was the same man who told people he'd never hit a woman. She wanted to believe her mother, but she told people she'd leave a man if he ever hit her. Most of all, she wanted to believe them, because if she didn't, she'd have to admit her parents were not only liars, but thieves as well. When Robert started grade 9, all three kids went to different schools and took separate buses. Since Cassie got home before her brothers, she'd be the first to assess whether it was going to be one of those nights. Along with measuring their degree of staggering and slurring, she'd listen to her parents' tone and take note of their location in the house. Her next test involved their dinner. If her mother cooked a delicious meal and everyone ate together, her chances of getting some sleep that night were good. If her mother cooked hot dogs or macaroni and cheese, and her father chose his drink over his dinner, her chances were 50-50. If her mother didn't cook at all and chose her drink over her dinner, odds were it would be a sleepless night. When they argued, they tried to out-victim the other. The new problem got mixed in with the old, and the same pattern of deflecting responsibility would precede one of them blaming the other of failing to change. Sometimes the names of people she didn't know were thrown into the mix, and one of her parents would accuse the other of cheating. Cassie would lay awake listening for the names and themes that usually escalated the situation from verbal to physical. When she heard those triggering words, she'd move to the front hall closet where between the slats, she'd be able to see if they stopped arguing because they'd passed out or because he was strangling her. Her brothers would be in their rooms listening too. Sometimes they got up and tried to separate them. Other times they called the police. When the boys in blue arrived, they'd talk with their father, who, depending on the marks his hands left, would either deny hurting his wife or say he was defending himself. They never took him away, nor did they take their mother to a safe place. Instead, they told one parent to go sleep on the couch and the other to go to their bed, which most of the time they actually did. After his assault, her father would pretend he'd stopped drinking, but everyone in the family knew he had bottles hidden in the garage and under his bed. Eventually, her mother's curt one-word replies would become sentences. Soon she'd start cooking his favorite meals again, and another armistice would begin. But the honeymoon stage wouldn't last long. The tension in the house would begin building, and it would happen again. When her intoxicated mother wasn't arguing with her father, she'd wake Cassie up because she needed someone to talk to. Ungoverned by the alcohol, she'd speak to her daughter as if she were an adult, and would rarely remember what she said the next morning. Oftentimes she'd talk about the untimely passing of her father, who died of a sudden heart attack when she was 5 years old. Describing him as charismatic, handsome, and generous, she believed he'd earned his place in heaven because he worked long hours and gave his extra money to the poor. Because her Catholic mother didn't speak ill of the dead, she'd never tell her youngest daughter the truth about her father, which was that he loved vodka and betting on the horses more than his family. Nor would she point out how she worked her fingers to the bone trying to support their 7 children, while he spent the money he earned on himself. When she got on the topic of her mother, she'd repeat the stories of her difficult childhood and would eventually admit how she resented her mother for not dying instead. Tainted by her victim perspective, she'd blame her teenage shoplifting and truancy on her mother and would proudly profess how she defied her mother's rule and started dating Cassie's father when she was only 14. At her wit's end, and concerned because he was 5 years older, her mother warned her virtue was at stake, but she didn't care because unknowingly, and perhaps instinctively, she'd fallen in love with a man just like her father. Then, depending on where they were in the cycle of abuse, she'd compliment or criticize the man she went on to marry and would proclaim they'd never divorce, which reassured Cassie, but concerned her as well. When she finished sharing her intimate thoughts, she'd go sleep beside the husband she couldn't trust and didn't respect, or she'd fall asleep in Cassie's bed and keep her awake with her drunken snoring. Chronically lacking sleep, and usually wondering if her father was hurting her mother or if she was hurting herself, Cassie found it hard to concentrate in class. Anxious to get home to check on her, she lied about why she couldn't participate in extracurricular activities, and because the meandering school bus took far too long, she rode her bike to and from school whenever possible. Studying at the School of Hard Knocks instead, she pretended she was sick and stayed home when tensions were high. Since she'd learned she couldn't rely on her parents to be sober or on time, she didn't bother asking if she could join the brownies, and after arriving home to smears, droplets, and tea towels soaked in blood, she learned she couldn't go to sleepovers either. Her family continued to struggle until her mother and 2 of her sisters opened a restaurant together. When their home-style cooking gained popularity, her father went on the payroll. The money was coming in again, and everyone was as happy as they knew how to be. If this chapter triggered something in you and you'd like help sorting it out, I offer energy therapy sessions, educational guidebooks, and newsletters with additional self-healing content. You can find everything you need at pppenergytherapy.com, and please remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel.